literally asked me for a divorce the morning I was shutting down pets.com.
You're kidding. Julie Wainwright, the founder and former CEO of The RealReal, the luxury resale giant. She's been named one of Entrepreneur's 50 most daring entrepreneurs, Fast Company's most creative people, and has graced the cover of Forbes. Give me the biggest public failure of my life so that I can conquer my fear of failure.
But I do see more women always thinking, well, I have a lot to learn before I start my own company. And I have never heard those words come out of a man's mouth. The only reason The RealReal got its first round of venture capital is there was a female venture capitalist at the table. Women should have money to chart their own destiny, so you're not making decisions for the wrong reason. Once you start getting jealous of something, that means you're not recognizing your own potential. If you're true to your priorities and your values, it's never too late to start a company.
Welcome to the show, Julie. I'm so excited that you're here. And I know the women who listen to Make Shift Happen are going to be obsessed with all of the wisdom and experience and knowledge that you bring to this conversation. As I was just telling you, going over your career, your accomplishments, your journey, like there are so many things that I was fascinated about you for and wanted to ask you. So I'm even interested to see where this interview takes us because I have a million things that I could ask you about. But I wanted to start with kind of showcasing this really dynamic career that you've had, leading multiple companies, building The RealReal into a billion-dollar brand, and, now launching something completely new with Ahara and writing a book. But before we get into all of that, I'd really love to go back a little bit and just take us back to kind of the moment when you first felt the pull to become a founder and what was happening in your life or career at that point, and if you could have ever imagined this kind of path that you were embarking on at that time.
Well, I was a CEO to hire in the tech world. First of all, thank you. Let's back up. Thank you for having me on. I know we already had a little chat ahead of time, and I am one of those people, I just jump in, but thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. And I am excited to talk about my book, Time to Get Real. So, I'm very excited about it. Well, but to that question specifically, I was a CEO to hire in startup companies. So they tended to be, when I ran Berkeley Systems, it was 30 million, 25 million, and sort of moving downward. They were having a struggle and turned it around. When I went to real.com, which was the first site to sell movies, it was only about 5 million in revenue. And then I was hired to run pets.com when it was about $100,000 in revenue and to take that. So I had this long experience, and I joined a startup in my early 20s of working with founders and being part of the startup environment. And I loved it. I honestly loved it. What happened is, I'll tell you why I loved it. There's so many reasons. One is it's innovative, it's collaborative. I love technology. We were doing really cool things, working with smart people. And it was, especially in the 80s and 90s, it's still a great industry. But in the early 80s, it was more of a meritocracy. There were a lot of great women in tech doing things. So, it was fun. I worked very closely with the founders when I was the CEO because the companies were small. The founders were still in the company. And it's one of the most exciting things to see someone take their idea and then create a business, even though some were in different stages. These people had real vision. And, I'm always one of those people where once you start getting jealous of something, you're like, then you have to do it. That means you're not recognizing your own potential. So I always honored the founders, but I was also jealous of them. I'm like, they had this great vision and they've done these things. Now, I came in to help them, but it was their vision I was executing. So that was a great way to sort of dip your toe in without all the risk. Having said that, when I ran pets.com, it didn't do well. And I had this sort of big failure on my shoulder. It was really too early. We couldn't raise the other rounds, but it was viewed as a failure in the software industry and in the tech industry in general. It was sort of became the poster child for the dot-com explosion. That was 25 years ago. And my career just sort of ground to a halt. And I was in a position where I had to make a decision that either I start my own company or I just get out of town and do something completely different. And that company I started was The RealReal. So I would say I had run my course in being a gun to hire and in the tech world. And I was really at a crossroads and I decided to bet on myself.
Yeah, and it really worked out, which we'll talk about because that's a very cool story too. But in your book, Time to Get Real, there is this kind of emphasis on transforming failure into that launch pad for reinvention, as you were just speaking about. And you've had to reinvent yourself so many times. I think this is the case for a lot of people, but I think especially women in these creative endeavors, like and with marketing in general, you have to continue kind of becoming these new versions of yourself in order to stay relevant and adapt to the times and shift to your own internal evolution of who you are and like what you want to bring to the world. So when women like say, because there'll be a lot of people listening to this podcast that are entrepreneurial, ambitious women, maybe they want to build something, whether it's big or small, but they have these dreams to build something of their own, but they might be like, I'm afraid of failing. What would you say to those people, being someone who's walked through that fire and come out the other side? What is your kind of perspective on that now?
Well, I think the first thing is I was afraid of failing. And when I look back, why I didn't start my own company prior to The RealReal and is failure really did sort of was out there. And it was also, it's a big deal. It's an act of faith to start your own company. I've always been the big earner. I've taken care of a lot of people and my family at different times. And, to just say, no, I'm going to do this and I'm going to make money and it'll be fine. And if I fail, it'll be fine because it'll be learning. That wasn't in my DNA. When I had the big failure with pets.com, it oddly wiped out my fear of failure. I didn't know that till later, but having gone through it, it was a public failure. I mean, there were a lot of negative articles or negative articles on me. There was some public ostracization because everyone was upset about the dot-com explosion. Oddly enough, though, coming out of it, I'm like, okay, I just walked on hot coals and yes, it burned, but I didn't die. And not only did I not die, I know myself better now and I'm stronger than I've ever been. And that wiped out my fear of failure. Now, if you would have told me that was going to happen, I wouldn't have bet that.
Right.
But it did wipe it out.
And you still probably wouldn't have chosen it because no one wants to say, give me the
No.
biggest public failure of my life so that I can conquer my fear of my
No.
fear of failure.
No, you wouldn't. I mean, there's, but there you go. I wouldn't have picked that problem out and say, oh, I'll own that one. But it worked. It worked. I mean, it was a little more difficult because whenever I talk about it, my marriage also fell apart during that time. And that had another emotional charge to it. Oddly enough, I didn't view that as a failure, just the business side. And that's because so many people have, never, marriage is hard. And so is business. But I kept myself slack on the marriage part. I didn't on the business side. And I beat myself up for way too long. And it didn't work. And here's the other thing, I'm beating myself up, but there were something like 1,100 companies that also shut down during this time. One of which was a company called Webvan, which is the precursor to Instacart and even DoorDash to a lesser degree. They burned through like $1.2 billion of cash. Pets.com was the precursor to Chewy.com. So really it was a timing issue. But the guy running Webvan was back working in a blue chip company in 18 months. Nothing. It's like he didn't, seemed to, I have never talked to him. I did talk to him during that time, but I haven't talked to him since, but it didn't seem to phase him. And yet I was taking on all of this issue, this, public failure and feeling bad. And what a waste. And I let it go too long. What a waste of energy. And when I read about how women deal with failure versus men, we do tend to shoulder more. Men do tend to brush it off. I think we can learn a lot about that. That doesn't mean you don't learn from it. It does mean that, that's what life is about. If you're not taking risks, if you don't take risks, you're not going to fail. But failure happens even when you don't take risks. So, you just got to treat it as a learning experience.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask about that. If you felt like the difference between the way you both kind of handled that had anything to do with the fact that he was a man and you're a woman, and women often tend to take things a lot more personally, whereas men can kind of, I don't know, keep that in a separate category in their brain in some way.
Which is
but yeah,
so healthy. I mean, it's healthy until it becomes arrogance, right? But it's a healthy way to go through life, to assess and say, this worked, this didn't. I can do this differently next time. In this case, all funding left the building. So I don't know if I would have, I'll tell you what I would have done differently though, because, you always have to assess. I did shut pets.com down to give money back to shareholders. I shouldn't have done that. I should have played it out and taken it to bankruptcy. And the reason being is I shut it down because I felt like I wouldn't be able to get funding because the markets had shut, the window had shut. I needed more money to get to profitability. I could have been wrong. I could have been wrong. I wasn't wrong, but I would say it was 50-50. I could have been wrong.
And do you think that there was an element there of your care for the shareholders,
Yes.
of wanting that maybe a man would have been like, well, I'm going to ride this out because they didn't have as much of that, care for like, oh, but we got to take care of these shareholders?
Well, I don't know how I know mine was. I can't talk to the other side of the equation. I know mine was an ultimate care for the shareholders, but I could have done it wrongly. Like I said, if I had been wrong, then I shortchanged them. Since I was right, the early investors all made money.
Right. And to kind of go back to this, chapter of your life, do you think that looking back, was there any correlation between that loss and failure with pets.com coinciding with the dissolution of your marriage? Was there
Oh boy,
did that affect your personal life?
Yeah, of course it did. Yes. I mean, he literally asked me for a divorce the morning I was shutting down pets.com.
You're kidding.
No. So yes, it was when you start a business, or in this case, I took a business from like $100,000 to, I think I got it to like 25 or 26 million in a year and a half. But when you do that, it takes a lot of energy and it takes a lot of focus. And if there's cracks, because there were cracks in our relationship, they're unattended. And, things don't heal on their own. Maybe in some miracle way they could, but in general, you need to put energy into something that's not working to get it back on track. So I would say, yes, it made things worse now, or I'm going to give you another perspective, or that was going to end anyway. So that pressure actually ended a marriage that should have ended when it did end, as opposed to being in it another 8 to 10 years, which people do fall into that because and we didn't have children, so we didn't have that pressure to stay together. But I know a lot of people that stay in the marriages assuming that, it'll get better, or maybe it's not that bad, but they're not that happy, or they just don't want to face the fear of being alone. So, maybe it was a good thing. It put pressure on it and the differences were too great. And it was hard at the time because when I went home, it was terrible because I went home that night. I had no company and no husband. He wasn't in the house. And then I had press at my door the next day. So it was just a lot. But looking back, it it's probably better that the marriage ended sooner rather than another 8 or 9 years. Life is so short. Now I was 42. I had time, I had like a long, when you're 40, I remember looking back at old pictures of myself thinking, oh my God, I'm so old. I was so hot. I wasn't old. I was like on it. And, and I'm like, oh, but when you're in it, it feels like it's not that. And so, but life is short, and it gave me an opportunity to grow in other ways. How's that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think a lot of women will relate to this, reality that you spoke to of sometimes when you're building something like that, when you have an ambition so big or a goal so big or a vision so big, there is a reality of your time being limited of where you can allocate that resource. And sometimes there are things that get put on the back burner. And for a lot of women who are highly ambitious or are founders or have these big visions, sometimes the thing that gets put on the back burner is relationships. And as you said, if there's cracks there, then it might reveal them faster or things might break down that may have been a good thing had you had the time to nurture it. What have you learned in your journey of, being someone who's accomplished so much and had to divert a lot of, time, attention, and energy towards your career and these businesses that you are helping build and then your own? What's your perspective now on that kind of balance that is, so elusive when it comes to nurturing relationships versus really going hard on your vision and your dream?
There's no such thing as balance in life. There's just not. And I think the key is to check in with your values, check in with your priorities, and then align your actions with those things. And the reason I say that is um, um, tending to children still falls mostly to women. So if you want to have children, then you need to build that into your, it better be a priority, and you better align your actions with that. Caring for your parents in many ways can fall on the woman also. And that is something that if that's important to you, then you better align your actions with that. And here's what I would say, that if you're true to your priorities and your values, it's never too late to start a company. All right. And meaning that I started The RealReal when I was 52. So the decision to have children, which I didn't, was made. All right. I had to make it. I went through a period where I had to really decide when I was 42 years old, when I got a divorce. And in doing that and getting a divorce, then I knew, I really went through about 2 years of, should I adopt? Should I, just have a child on my own? It was really intense. And then once I decided that was done. So I would say, take care of your priorities and your values. And then if you start a company later in life, great. It's not, now I had a big career before I was, 52. I had a lot to build on, but you always have a lot to build on if you're engaged in something. You always have a lot to build on. And then you just have to, again, align your values. But it's not too late at all. And here's the other thing. When you're asking, I kept thinking I had a lot to learn. I kept thinking, because, I started my career at Clorox. I learned all about P&L management and large, big brand management. And then I went to the tech world. And I felt like, I have a lot to learn about technology and how it looks and the shifts and how technology is evolving. In the meantime, a lot of young men around me were like, I'm going to learn it on the job. I'm going to start this company and learn it as I go. And both are valid, by the way. But I do see more women always thinking, well, I have a lot to learn before I start my own company. And I have never heard those words come out of a man's mouth. And I've been in pitch meetings with young entrepreneurs over and over and over again. And they never, ever think that way. I'm sure there are some, there's always exceptions. I haven't heard it. I've heard it consistently from women.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's so real. This feeling of not enoughness in a sense of like, I need to learn more, I need to have more experience. I mean, there's so many statistics about even just women applying for jobs and how ruthless they are with themselves of, I have to meet all these requirements that are in the job description before I feel like I'm even qualified to apply. And a man is like, sees one bullet point that he's like, I kind of know how to do that. And he's like, applied. I got this. I can do this. And I think we can learn a lot from that. And I don't know if it's delusion or if it's confidence or it's a mix of both, but I would argue that those are helpful traits when you want to be a visionary and someone who's highly successful.
I think those are, and then you learn a lot from sports too. I'm really an advocate of young um, males and females getting into sports when they're younger, because you learn that's where you learned failure. You learn like, okay, we lost the game. What are we going to take away? Because we're going to win the next game. How do we get better? So those attributes are really critical for life skills, and learning how to play in the team is also critical. Because at the end of the day, most things you do are a team sport. So learning that is also critical. So there's just so many things, but I agree with you completely. Learning, we have a lot to learn from how men handle things. But sports also teaches us quite a bit, and some of the same talent. Yeah, it actually builds your talent and your resilience.
Yeah, I think now that you say that, there's a lot of dynamics of team sports that are, valuable for not just business or building a business, but even like parenthood. That's a team sport, right? And like
It
sometimes
should be.
sometimes you're going to be the A player and sometimes you're not. And like you have to deal with that dynamic of, supporting the person that's the weakest link and, not getting overly frustrated that, everyone on your team isn't the high performer or like trying to lift people up. There's so much there. So I think that's a really good analogy as well. But you did mention, starting the Real Real in your 50s. And I'm curious what you decided to do differently, if anything, at that point in your life, because you had learned so much in your career already, but this was like a new endeavor. As you said, you were done being, the insert CEO, and you were like now going to be the founder. Um, what did you do differently in your 50s than you did in your 30s or 40s, even if it was just like a mindset or how you approached conversations or things like that?
Well, I knew a couple things. I had a big failure, and I knew I was going to be going back to the tech world. It's the Real Real is basically a tech enabled business. So I knew I had to get the model and the revenue at a certain level before I went into that world to try to raise capital. So normally when you start a business, you're pitching a concept, you have a little bit of traction. It's hard to just get an idea funded. I mean, maybe in the early days, but everyone wanted traction then, certainly does now. So I got the business to $10 million before I raised a real round of venture capitalists. And I felt like the business model had been proven to some degree. So and it was a lot of work. And I did raise some outside capital, which I talk about in the book. But even that was like, 25,000 here, 50,000 here, really
Really
working,
bootstrapped.
really bootstrapped. And uh, that was a whole new mindset. So getting it to that level, I thought, well, the success is undeniable then. But having said that, it was always hard to raise capital. It's always hard. So it was undeniable to me, but it wasn't, I had to convey that to every investor and then deliver. Other than that, I would say everything was easier in your 50s because you know what you
That's good.
need.
That's good news.
Well, I mean, I knew what I needed to do. I needed the timeline. I knew I could draw on the experience. I also knew how to read. Was I believing my own PR? Or were things going well? So I knew how to iterate fast. I would say I knew how to hire for my weaknesses, but I wasn't trying. I mean, obviously at the beginning you're doing everything, and I mean everything. But the first employee was a woman named Rati Levesque, who's now the CEO. And I needed a merchant. I needed to help people understand that wearing resale was cool, and I needed to make it look cool. And I knew I couldn't do that job. So I knew like that person was going to make a big difference. But I also needed that person to be a jack of all trades and clean it. Like we were taking out the trash and calling UPS and answering customer service and doing emails. So luckily my first employee was great. She had the talent, she had the skill set I didn't, but still rolled up her sleeves and got things done.
That's so cool that she's now the CEO.
I
I mean,
know.
what a
I know.
what a cool story. I love that. You mentioned, raising capital, and you've obviously navigated the power dynamics of being in those rooms that are often dominated by men and money. So I'm interested to know what kind of tactics or mindsets helped you hold your own and still like lead with authenticity and be yourself, and also be an advocate for the vision, because this at the time is like a totally new concept. It's a new category, and it's fashion. And so I don't know if you felt like there was this perception of not understanding what you were trying to create or seeing the vision. But what would you say to women in terms of like navigating those power dynamics with men and money?
So everything you said was true. And let's just say men didn't get it. So in the book, I have a couple really funny stories, which was one I'll share with you. I was at a venture capital meeting, and normally you meet with a young associate. If the associate likes what you say, they pass you on. Most associates are men, and they're usually men in their late 20s, sometimes early, mid 20s. So in this case, I got a warm introduction. So I went to a young partner, a relatively new partner, and he put so you have to pitch before you pitch, and then you pitch again. All right. So you pitch, you're pitching all the time, but usually you meet with someone, then you meet with a partner, you meet with an associate, either go or no go. Then you meet with the partner, and then you get to pitch all partners in a Monday. Almost all meetings in the Valley happen on Monday morning. So you go there with your deck and your team and you pitch. And if you get past that, you usually get a term sheet. All right. So, but the goal of these first people is to get rid of people, right? Basically, because everyone has a quota, or they don't call it a quota. Everyone answers to someone. So they want to make sure they're getting the deals that they need, and they're getting deal flow, and they fill out deal flow for their LPs to understand. So they want to make sure they say, oh, we looked at this, we looked at that, we passed for this reason. All right. So you're going to get, chances are you're going to get passed. But this guy was the partner. We come in, I give him the story, and he put his foot on the table, and he had this ugly shoe. And he said, see this shoe? As if I couldn't see his foot on the table. I said, yes. And he said, I've had this for 5 years, and, I have no interest in buying other shoes. What do you think of that? As if The RealReal was about shoes. I said, I don't think you're my customer. And this meeting is pretty much over. And that was it. That was, that's sort of what the power dynamic, someone basically shooting down the idea and negating the data because he didn't buy into it. And this is an early stage problem, by the way. So, but the company was already at 10 million, didn't buy into it, didn't buy into the concept, and, wanted to tell me from his perspective. And it was a silly perspective. It was demeaning. But I mean, I don't think he laughed, but I know I laughed when I left. I don't think he was probably put off. I would say that the only reason The RealReal got its first round of venture capital is there was a female venture capitalist at the table who actually understood. And there was a male who was a European male who understood. And the combination actually helped, because this was a nascent business. I know 10 million may seem like a lot, but when these guys are looking at businesses that can get to $1 billion, which The RealReal did, and is. But, at the time, it's a $10 million business with like 6 people working really hard and trying to make it work. And you're asking them for a $10 million investment. So they have to buy into your vision. They have to love the idea of it, because they're going to be with you most likely 8 to 10 years. Investments go on a long time. And if we didn't have a woman at the table and a European man and another venture capital firm, it wouldn't have gotten funded. It's really simple as that, because the people I was meeting with loved eBay. They're like, eBay's fine. This is great. And it's like, no, it was for them. And many of them came from eBay. So and they didn't found eBay. They weren't founders. Most of the people you're meeting with haven't founded anything. They're numbers guys, or they think they're risk takers, but they tend not to be operators, and they tend not to be founders. There's always exceptions, but that's really where they come from, a financial background.
Yeah. And I think the, challenge that you had was obviously this is a category defining brand. It's kind of creating something completely new in the marketplace. I mean, the RealReal really changed consumer behavior. It was like the first thing that normalized resale for luxury fashion. For anyone who's listening that might not be familiar with the RealReal, can you kind of explain what the vision for it was and what it is now?
It's not much different. The RealReal, the goal was to provide a marketplace where people could sell their luxury goods, only, luxury and high end, and focused on fashion. So it would be clothing, handbags, fine jewelry. We then expanded into a little bit of art, a little bit of home, but all clothing, shoes, fashion, handbags, fine jewelry, and provide a opportunity to have the world's largest marketplace for these luxury goods, an opportunity for people to experience this in a way where it's authenticated for them. And for a consigner, the RealReal did all the work, still does. I mean, they'll come to your house, they'll pick up the goods, they ship it to an ops center. It's actually authenticated. The copy's written, pictures are taken, it's picked, packed, and shipped. I think there's 38 million members now at the RealReal, probably more. But so you've got this large group of eyeballs looking at your product, and it gets the optimal price, and things sell pretty quickly. But no one had thought about this before, and eBay was really one size fits all for everything. It was sort of brilliant. eBay was a great proof point. They were doing luxury goods there, but they weren't doing, the luxury goods were never shown in a way where
it felt like a luxury
no,
experience.
usually most of them were on the back of a closet. Further, I mean, the RealReal, when I was there, employed the most gemologists in the world. So, to really resell jewelry, it needs to be evaluated by gemologists. You need to be able to stand behind it. To resell handbags, they need to be authenticated. They're too expensive. Same thing with clothing. So setting up that trust factor, and then doing all the work, and then showing how relevant it is. I mean, these items are amazing. You can look up there today and right now, and there's stuff on there that's in the stores, because we have a lot of people at the RealReal, when they would consign, they'd wear it for 6 months and they were over it. And, and it would still be in the stores. And when it comes to things like shoes don't change that much at all. And even classic handbags are still incredibly valuable. And let's just say a Cartier diamond or Cartier bangles or a Cartier watch is still a Cartier watch. And it's highly desirable, among other things. Same thing with the Rolex. So you've got this beautiful heritage of these fine goods. And the RealReal is the only company that does all of that. So it was a big vision. It was always that vision. It was always to make it really easy for people to consign by sending someone to your house and consulting on prices and doing the pickup. And then for the consigner to make sure that there's trust and authentication. What wasn't on the roadmap at the time was doing a brick and mortar store. And that was a test that we did in like October, I think, of, I'm going to say 2017, and in Soho. And it did so well that then we really wanted to get our first store launched as fast as possible. It might have been October of 2015. Anyway, it's in the book. It's in the book because I had, the beauty of having your iPhone is I took so many pictures of everything. So I knew exactly when everything happened, from the first really crunchy bad warehouse to this mega we had about 1.5 million square feet of warehouse space when I left.
I know, it's so true. I just keep paying for more and more iCloud storage because I'm like, this is the vault that I need to remember when things happened in my life. The camera roll is like you just go back and you're like, okay, that now it's clear. But I'm so curious, like this obviously was an incredible idea for the Real Real that you had. How did it come to you? Were you someone who loved luxury goods and you just started thinking like there's a lot of people that would get use out of this stuff, that this luxury bag that I've had forever that I don't want anymore? Was it your idea? Was it someone else's? Like, how did this come
No, it
to,
was
how
my
did it come to
idea.
you?
No, it was my idea. So first, look, I have an analytical brain. So I wanted to create a large business and I knew I'd have to compete with Amazon. So I wanted something that they couldn't do. I mean, I wasn't thinking small. Let's just put it that way. So I wanted to do something that Amazon couldn't do. And and luxury was one that I didn't believe they could do, and they still really can't do it at all. So the luxury market was one area they couldn't go into. And then I thought, well, I'm not going to do a luxury brand. So I had this matrix of things they couldn't do well, things that I had an interest on, and I had values attached to it too. I wanted to do something that was going to leave the world a little better than it was before. So I did have a value statement there. I was looking at even getting back in to the packaged goods world where, because at that time, the detergents, the biggest one was seventh generation that was actually the most eco-friendly. And because I had had experience at Clorox, I knew the environmental impact of some of the products. So I thought, well, maybe I can also go in that direction. But I had a lot of ideas and I had I had a lot of categories, no ideas, but they were in my head. So I'm shopping with a girlfriend in November. And I remember this clear as day. We're in a little boutique in Menlo Park, California, full price product. In fact, it was shoes. It was luxury shoes in the front. Full price product in the front, back of the store. The store owner had a little area she called the vault. And that was all consigned goods and beautifully displayed. That's where my friend shopped. My friend, by the way, then and now is a multimillionaire. And she spent her money buying pre-owned goods. I had been shopping with her many times before. When we walked out, I had so many questions about like what just happened there. Have you ever walked into a consignment store? She said she never would. She does too many. She didn't like the way things look. She didn't like to want to sort through things. I said, would you ever shop on eBay? She said, no, I wouldn't. Too many fakes. I just don't want to do it. Have you ever consigned? She goes, never. I said, but you just bought consignment. And she said, Julie, I bought Louis Vuitton, Prada, and Gucci at a great price. Who cares if it's previously owned? And I trust the owner that it's authenticated. That was it. I went home that night. I researched the luxury market. I looked in my own closet to see what I had that I could sell. I had like over 60 things. I started going to consignment stores. I called the owner of the store, who was a former tech exec, and said, hey, do you want to talk about this? I think this should be on the internet. It makes more sense. And she said, sure, we'll set up a meeting. But her priorities weren't there by the time she got back to me, and it was the holidays. So she got back to me in March, but I already had put some money in it, had an idea, had a name, had the whole concept fleshed out, and was meeting with seed investors to try to raise some more money in March of 2012, and we launched that year in June. And I was out looking for my head of merchandising because I knew I couldn't do it. All of that happened so quickly because I knew once I had that idea, I better run with it. Because here's something else, which I fully believe. If you're picking up something, it's sort of in the atmosphere, and maybe it's a big idea, someone else is too. And then it comes down to, do you execute it and not how well do you execute? Where, are you differentiated? Are you offering real value? I've had hundreds of people come up to me and said, oh, I had the idea for the RealReal. And if I'm feeling snarky, I'll go, but the difference is you didn't do it. And that's the difference for every entrepreneur, where people sit there and say, oh, I had that idea. And it's like, okay, ideas are great, but unless you execute it sublimely, that's where you leave it, having that idea. So that's the story. It really was sort of I knew I wanted to get back into e-commerce, laying the groundwork in my head, then recognizing that this is my luxury opportunity, doing more research. I tested all these different ways and then running as fast as I could and making it happen.
Yeah, I mean, as they say, money loves speed. And I don't know if you've ever read the book Big Magic by Liz Gilbert, but she talks about that idea that ideas are these sort of energetic entities that are looking for a way to be birthed into the world. And they come and they visit people. And if you don't capture it and start to actually be the vessel for that manifestation to become a real thing in the world, they will float off and find someone else. And so there's all these crazy stories of how people have had quite literally the exact same idea for the exact same book with titles and character names and all the things. And it's
That's
just, again,
great.
to prove that concept that you were speaking to, which is like, ideas want to be born into the world. And if you are not going to move on them, they will find another vessel. They'll find another way into the physical.
Well, just to give you, I didn't read the book, but I have read her other book. So I will put that on my list. But I have to say, look, my pets.com was the first pet site funded. 7 more were funded after that. The RealReal, the first luxury consignment, there was a company called Threadflit. Also similar idea, it's gone. They didn't focus on supply. They didn't do all the work for the consignor. Anyway, but same idea, got funding. Poshmark was out raising capital when I was out raising capital. So again, thinking differently than eBay. And then the guy who put his foot on the table ended up, at that VC, ended up funding ThreadUp. All right, which is, a low end, does all the work for someone, but a low end. So, you look at it and it is, when you tap into something, it is there. There is no doubt about it. I've seen it time and time and time again. And you do have to move fast, but you also have to execute beautifully.
Yeah. I want to talk about the moment that the company went public. It was obviously a massive milestone with a valuation of, I think, 1.6 billion, if I'm
think
not
it
mistaken.
went up to 2.1 at one point.
Awesome. So huge milestone, but something that no one really talks about, which is a conversation that I've heard other founders speak to in certain spaces on social media and things like that, is kind of what happens emotionally for the founder after the IPO. So I'd love to know your experience of what it felt like behind the scenes. You work so hard up to that moment, and it's obviously a huge milestone, but was there like a crash after that? Was there a disillusionment of feeling like now, I have to find something else to pour my purpose into? What was your experience, honestly?
It was great.
Okay, I love it.
Period. It was great. I was the 23rd woman to ever take a company public. When I walked into NASDAQ, they have the fraternity row of all the other people that have taken on their platform. There was not one woman's picture up there. I made sure that my investors had liquidity and they got their money back. It was a long journey for them. Some had their money in for 8.5 years. That's a long time. Some employees they had a better chance at a better life. Everyone in the company had stock. So employees had a better chance. It felt like, when you take money, you have to get it out. There's only 2 ways. You either merge with someone or you go public. So I felt like it was a big change, and the business was really doing well. So I felt like we had this predictable business on the path to profitability. And then all this shenanigans happened, which again, I write about in the book, that really started messing with the business. And then COVID hit. I would say it was great. It was great. It was nice to see. I mean, people could buy a condo, the early employees. I used to say to the earliest employees because everyone's like, oh, I want more money. And of course, we couldn't pay people that much money at the beginning. I said, why don't you ask for stock? Why don't you really come on, ask for more stock? Almost universally, they didn't. And what a shame. And the person that gave me that first $50,000 check, if they could sell right during the IPO because they weren't part of the insider group, they would have made $1.5 million from that investment. I don't know if they ever sold. You never have visibility, but that makes you feel good. It's like, good. This is great. It's great. It was great. It was great. It was really great.
What was the experience like when you were able to cut your check from that?
Well, you're limited because you are an insider. And so you just file all these things with the SEC. You file your selling plan. It's great. It's a life changer. It's great. I mean, one of the things I firmly believe is women should have money should chart their own destiny. They should make their own money. So you're not making decisions for the wrong reason. And I've seen it time and time again, and it doesn't get easier. This is what doesn't get easier when you're older. If you didn't have that mentality of, I need to be able to make my own way, make my own money, not rely on another person for my money, and then something happens, either death or divorce, and then they're lost. It's all bad, and it's all bad. And so then what happens? Well, they're looking for a wealthy person. They're compromising their values. You get into compromises that are probably right at the time and maybe necessary, but it's hard to live with yourself if you compromise your values. However, if you view making your own money and having your own money, it gives you freedom, and hopefully you're going to come to the table with pure intentions that aren't compromised. Unless you become a megalomaniac, then you got another issue. But that doesn't happen to many people.
Yeah, I mean, I think money gives you choices, right? And so what you're saying is when you have all the choices and the ability to support yourself, you don't have to sacrifice or, compromise on a value or get yourself into a situation that you wouldn't naturally choose to be in because you need, this person to support you, or because you need your parents, or because you need, this man's money, or whatever the situation is. And I think that's really real, and is important for women now that we have the ability to make our own money, and lots of it. Like, what a privilege and a beautiful experience to have that freedom, so that everything else in your life gets to be this kind of extra. And it really does get to be the cherry-picked experiences of how you want to live your life, because you're not relying on someone else's path or purview, or how you need to follow their rules because you need them financially. I think that's really, really important and beautiful wisdom for women everywhere, just to empower them that, even if you don't want to be a business owner or the breadwinner or the provider for your family, it's still a good idea to make your own money and find ways to create that little sense of freedom and independence and power of choice for yourself. Absolutely. So
wait, I do want to say one thing though, everything you said is absolutely spot on. I love it. We're also, and I think about this quite a bit, I'm also feel lucky I was born in the US. And while women are still way behind, and women get less than 2% of all venture capital in the world, I know, less than 2%. It was 2.1. Now it's below, but it's rounding error at that level anyway. Still, you can do it here. You can still do it here. And that's just luck being born here. I mean, we're all from immigrants, right? We're all, my father's mother and father are first generation. So his parents met on the boat over, one from Norway, one from, England. And my mother's family came over in the 1600s. So they'd been here a long time. But, it's luck, to be honest, that we're born here, and we do have opportunities, and they're amazing. And regardless, this is why I want to, it's so, and regardless of your age, regardless of your income, I didn't graduate from Harvard or Stanford. And I'm sitting in the room, most of the people, when you're pitching money in my world, they're MIT, Stanford, or Harvard. And they're very confident, I think is probably the best way to say it. But so what? They also don't have vision. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing what you're doing. If you've got vision and you can execute and you're resilient, and good things can happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that's beautiful, like to think of that perspective of how lucky we are. I mean, I think they say it's a 1 in 400 trillion chance that you're even born as a human. So then to think about, the chance that, you are have all these other privileges that you've had and look at that as this amazing opportunity of like for us to not squander it. I mean, it's wild. And you've obviously been one of those individuals who really like you took that potential and that privilege and you optimized it and you ran with it and you've created a lot of opportunities, a lot of jobs, a lot of money for a lot of other people in the world. And you've inspired so many people. And now with the book, getting this type of knowledge and wisdom in people's hands, I mean, the ripple effect of that is so real. And I think sometimes we can have this perspective that pursuing wealth or these business ideas can be a selfish game. And while, of course, there are selfish things that we get out of it, there's also a much bigger picture that lies on the other side of the people that you're impacting, the jobs that you're creating, the wealth that you are circulating and putting out into the world, the ideas that are inspiring people, even just working under you or alongside of you. I'm sure there's people that you don't even know how much you've inspired them or impacted them or, made them want to dream bigger or go out there and start something of their own. So it really is this beautiful ripple effect that we get to create in owning our ambitions and choosing to take the privilege and the opportunities that we've been given and actually make something of it, right?
You are so right. And I have to say that's why I did write the book, because when I was a young girl, I only had a few role models, and one of them was fictional. One of them was called Nancy Drew, who I don't know if you've ever, Nancy Drew was living large as a detective, riding that convertible, solving crimes in the Sierra, and I thought, oh, Nancy Drew is awesome. I wanted to be Nancy Drew. And I had Gloria Steinem. Later on, I had other people like Diane von Furstenberg, who was on every magazine doing amazing things. But the role models weren't around me to see what was possible. And all the stats have said, if you have someone that you know of that can do it, it actually does help you envision yourself either in your community or in touch or in business. If you see someone breaking the mold, for some reason, it unlocks possibilities. And if you don't, it's harder. Then you have to dream harder and you have to really believe in yourself. And you still do anyway, but just knowing that one person can do it, it's like, oh, I look, I went to Clorox as the second undergraduate they ever hired. I didn't get my MBA. I talked my way into it. Now, luckily, the first one worked out, but I was the second one they hired. And it never occurred to me I was going to fail there. Never occurred. Because, that other guy had done it. And I'm like, he's smart. It was a guy. Yeah, he's smart, but is he as smart as me? I don't know. I was pretty cocky back then. It was the youth. And also my professor had told me I was the best consumer marketer he'd ever met and ever when I was at Purdue, and he was visiting from Harvard and he helped me get the job. But I just look at, what we can do. And I think we're all role models and women are still underrepresented everywhere. And so if we see someone do it or beating the odds or coming up again, look at Martha Stewart. I mean, I didn't relate to Martha Stewart. I'm not a house person, I'm not a person that is a homemaker, but look what she did. I mean, she took Martha Stewart, for perspective, if my mother was alive, Martha Stewart's 4 years younger than my mother would have been. And my mother never even would have dreamed this big. But Martha Stewart took a category, making homes beautiful, and made it a business. No one had done that before. And she made it look easy, and she gave people systems. And I mean, what a rock star. When I think of, if my mother would have seen Martha Stewart, my mother would have been able to like maybe think differently. My mother had health issues, but still, we just don't have that many people doing remarkable things and dreaming differently. So I love that she's still out there doing it. I love it. I love that she's out there. She's reinventing herself. She's still doing what she does. And that's amazing. I think she's 84 or 85?
Yeah, I just watched her documentary recently, and it was illuminating for me too, because obviously when I was growing up, she was already very like a household name. So to kind of see that backstory and really see her climb and how much of an innovator and truly like, an inspiring woman that she was, to have such, as you said, such a big vision when she probably didn't have the expanders. She probably didn't have as many women that were out there showing her the way. And that's kind of your point of what you were saying, is it's like the 4-minute mile. Something that everyone thinks is impossible until someone does it. And then that creates the belief that, well, if they can do it, maybe I can do it. And then suddenly all these people are doing it. And that's what you're doing. That's what women everywhere are doing, that are following, this pull for their visions and these ambitions, is they are becoming these expanders. And we can believe things before we see them. But as you said, it takes a lot more work to do that. When you can see something to actually believe it, it makes it so real. It makes it so factual. And they say like the retina is the first point of process to the subconscious mind. And so if you actually see something as real in the world, your subconscious can immediately get on board that this is available, it's possible. If they can do it, I can do it too. And that just makes those wheels turn so much faster and allows even more innovation and more creations and more beautiful things to be born into the world. So I think it's so important for, women to be these expanders and sharing their wisdom and their knowledge, whether it's through books or social media. But we have so many cool ways to do that nowadays. So I'm excited that, you're doing that. And I think it's inspiring to see you at your age, still wanting to put things out in the world to continue to be that expander. I was curious, to ask you this question, because I'm sure you have an interesting response. But some people might think, okay, your company IPOs, it's valued at billions of dollars. Obviously, there's a huge payout there. Why not retire? Why not go and like live this, soft, rich girl life where you can give yourself everything that you need and you can finally relax? Because I think that is this dream or false reality that people have, is like the dangling carrot of like, well, once I get there, then I'll be able to be at peace. Then I'll be able to relax. So what's your perspective on like the purpose and what that brings you and wanting to keep going?
I think purpose changes over time. All right. And look, I have a lot of energy. Luckily I have great health. So energy, health. I think for me, really my next phase is figuring out how I can continue to give back and inspire people and provide a bigger platform for it, because I'd love to see more female entrepreneurs, by the way. I'd love to see more entrepreneurs in general. I'd love to see more female entrepreneurs. And things change over time. I think once you check out of life, you're sort of, I don't know where you go there. I mean, I don't really, I'm not going to go play golf or something. I know people love the sport. It's really not my thing. And honestly,
Did you ever think about it? Did you ever think about like not starting another company or just like,
nope.
No.
No, because look, I have a role model, and that was my father. And he had his own art and design company, and he loved it. I mean, what a gift to have a parent that loved what they did, loved it. And then he ended up selling that. And then he became an artist to hire and did some weird things. One of them, he did Anheuser-Busch's beer steins. He conceptualized them, in some cases carved them. They used to have a beer stein division in their company. He became their best-selling beer stein artist of all times. He went around to different places and signed his beer steins. And then I know it's still, and then after that, he went to work for a little regional shoe company out of St. Louis, and he designed women's shoes. So he just kept reinventing himself. And he said it was the weirdest thing. He's going through all the magazines because, to get inspired like Vogue and Elle and any fashion magazine. And then he'd come across The RealReal. He goes, we ended up in the same in the same world. I'm like, well, you're not, he's like, no, I'm doing, luxury shoes. I'm like, oh, I think
You're like, you're not as luxury as me, but it's okay.
Yeah, exactly. So, but he loved what he did. And I think, as long as, again, what are your values? How do your actions meet your values? And as long as you can make a difference, why not keep trying? I mean, that's why there's things that happen. Certainly health things could derail that. But like I said, I feel like I've got a gift. I've got a gift of energy, a gift of great health, and I have a lot of work to do. So it's fun. And it's fun. To me, creating something's fun. Writing the book was fun. Have you heard people talk about it?
Was it?
Oh my God. Well, it was. I would say 90% of it was fun. And then I'm really honest about some of the dark days. And then we sort of have to relive it. And you do relive it when you write it, not sort of. And then that required wine, and that wasn't fun. And the nights, if you drink wine before you go to bed, not great. So, you just have disrupted sleep, sometimes nightmares, not fun. But at the end of it, yes, writing time to get real was fun, and I felt very happy with it. And then you have to work with other professional people that add value to get it out. But the writing part was fun.
Mostly fun, slightly traumatic, but
well, it did have that. It did have the dark. Look, and that's the other thing. I thought if I'm going to write a book, I have to be honest about things that aren't great.
And also if the title of the book is going to be Time to Get Real,
it has to be real. It has to be real. And it's not really healthy to live in the past and go back and replay all this negativity. And I kept thinking, well, what's the benefit here? And I'm like, well, the benefit's bigger than me. Because the other thing is, I haven't read a lot of books, business books that are that honest. They feel like they're more memoir, like nice. They're glossing over things. And that's not really helpful because business is hard and it does impact your life and it impacts other people. So it's hard. So I think writing these things down and the emotion, the people element, hiring. And then if you're running a business, hiring's hard. How do you get the right people with the right phase of your business? How do you get the right board members? I write down all the mistakes and, really where I should have done things, what we eventually did, because the business formula worked, but businesses don't run without great people. And that's really when you're scaling, that's usually when it gets hard. It's like, can I get great people around me? And are they the right people for the right time in the business? Because that's the other thing, that if you're scaling, the people that were great maybe at 10 million weren't great at 500 million.
Yeah.
So how do you keep adding talent? But then the people that are great at 1 billion, maybe they're not as creative. Maybe they're not risk takers. You still need that risk taking and innovation in a business. Maybe they're just really not great critical thinkers because what they've been doing in their other job was pretty much they'd done it for 20 years. They understood it and they didn't really understand how to come into a different environment. So, it's always a little bit of treachery. And when you're hiring, and I walk through, and there's a lot about hiring and people and hiring people and recommending people that have aligned values, really critical. And I didn't always do that. I did it with experience, but not always aligned values. So, it's sort of taking what I did and taking it to another level.
Yeah. This book is going to be a massively valuable roadmap for so many women, not just on, the tactical kind of side of being able to see the real of someone's business journey and the mistakes and the corrections and all of that, but also on that like emotional element, like you said, of understanding the ups and the downs and not feeling so alone in those experiences of the isolation of entrepreneurship, the challenges, the frustration, the failures, all of that. So I'm so excited. We are going to give away 5 copies of Julie's book. So if you guys go and comment under the trailer for this reel, just comment the word Julie. We're going to pick some winners. We are going to send you this book. I'm so excited to read it. I can't wait to get my hands on it. I've been researching everything about you, and I'm truly fascinated and so grateful that you came to Make Shift Happen to share your journey and your insight with us. Thank you so much, Julie. Can you let everyone know where they can connect with you online? Where's the best place to find you?
Sure. I'm at RealReal on Instagram. That's the best. At RealReal Julie. At RealReal Julie on Instagram. And honestly, when you read the book, it's like you have the pictures too right there. Because I've posted, I didn't have to do much of an edit off of that post because I'd been posting for a long time on there as the RealReal progressed. So it's really the story of the RealReal is woven in there, but it's not as deep as the book, obviously. But it's good. But I'm still very active at RealReal Julie. DM me. I'm getting DMs every day from female entrepreneurs, which is fun. It's really fun. And then it's always tricky. It's like, ooh, because a lot of the ideas aren't great. So then you have to ask them, like, what's your, what, here's a hint. If you want me to comment on your idea, then you should actually tell me what you want to know from me, because I'm doing this regularly. Because left alone, I'm going to come back and say, what do you want me to comment on? Because I have strong points of view on a lot, and I don't want to break somebody's dream because dreams are great. Dreams are great. And I may be wrong, but I am helping women through reviewing their businesses too.
So cool. All right, you guys, make sure you send Julie a DM on Instagram. Ask her a specific question if you want feedback on something. That's so fun, especially if you listened to this episode and you loved it. Shoot her a DM. Let her know that you found her through Make Shift Happen. And don't forget to comment Julie on the trailer so that we can send you a copy of her book. We will link everything in the show notes for you guys so that you can find it. You can go purchase the book. You can follow Julie on Instagram. Thank you so much. If you loved this episode and you know another female founder, entrepreneur, ambitious woman who would love to hear this episode, copy the link, send it to her in a message, let her know you were thinking of her, and we will talk to you guys next week. Bye.